Today I will be demonstrating some of the more advanced features of EzPerf. We get many questions about whether EzPerf can measure perforations on stamps that have multiples on them, like the one displayed here, or stamps on cover or on paper, and the answer is a definitive yes in both cases. What you need to do is you need to switch over to the expert side, which I'll do now by clicking here. And then what you need to do, as soon as I get it on screen, we'll load up our tools, and one of them is going to be the standard gauge. And then you choose your gauge. So let's say we think the stamp is a Perf 12 as an example. And there's a Perf 12 gauge displayed for us. What you can do is then you shift and right click and load your image or paste it from disk. So I have this block here, and we'll just move it over, and then you simply slide the custom gauge that you put on the screen and just line it up with the perf tips as you would have with a plastic gauge, and as you can see they line up. So this is a Perf 12. You can measure the other side by shift and left click on the gauge to flip it over, and again you can line it up either in the valleys or on the tips of the perfs. Depending on the stamp, I usually like to go for the tips, and as you can see this lines up just fine. There is another way to measure that stamp, and that's using what we call the linear gauge. So that's like your traditional sliding gauge, and this one you just kind of slide it over until you line up the lines, and as you can see right here, that tells me that's a Perf 12. So let's move on to a different stamp, and I'll bring up the standard gauge again. I'll choose my number 11, and then I'll shift and right click, load another image, and let's pick this guy here. So as you can see, that stamp is on cover or on a piece of paper. So what you need to do is slide the perfs so that they line up, and I can tell here that that's not quite right. So it's not a Perf 11, it's probably a Perf 11 and a half. So I redraw my Perf 11 and a half, and I line it up, and there we go. So that looks lined up. I'll check, whoops. I'll check the other side, and as you can see that lines up perfectly as well. So that's a Perf 11 and a half. And let's load a different image. So let's try this guy here. And let's try Perf 12, and that obviously doesn't line up. So we'll try I think it's 11 and a half, but I'm not certain. And that looks not quite right either, maybe 11 and 3/4. And that looks just about right. Let's flip it over. And measure this side, and that looks like it's probably an 11. And there you go. So it's really quite easy to measure stamps that are on cover or on a piece of paper. We can try another one. Let's use the linear gauge. And let's bring that over. Let's close this one off first. And we'll load an image here. And let's try this one. So again, you just kind of slide it until the perf tips line up. And that looks pretty close, so that's a Perf 12. As you can see, if you go down further, that's not going to line up. So it's just like your traditional plastic gauges. And let's do one last one here. Let's use the standard gauge again. So here's 3 stamps, well, 2 stamps on cover. And to measure this one, just make sure these are all visible here. So I take my gauge and I'll line it up. And that looks like a Perf 11. And then I shift and left click and I'll measure the other side. You can always measure all 4 sides just to be sure, so that looks like it's right on. And this guy here also looks like it's a Perf 11. And we can flip it to the top and double check. And there you go. So quite handy when you're measuring stamps on cover. Another nice feature that's built into EzPerf is the ability to measure distances. So if you wanted to measure, say, the design size of this particular stamp, just click on the, let me drag this down so you can see it. Actually, let me load it again. So if you wanted to measure the distance of this stamp, you click on the measure icon and you point it, you left click on the side you want to start on and you drag over, and as you can see at the top, that's telling us that it's 21.27 millimeters wide. We can also measure the height. So that's 3585. So quite handy, especially if you're trying to measure rotary and flat plate stamps. Well, that's it for today. If you have any other suggestions or need other videos for any other topics, just let us know. All right, enjoy.